The air in the basement was dense, stale with time, wrapping around Elise like a memory too heavy to shake. The 26-year-old library assistant moved slowly, brushing cobwebs aside as she catalogued boxes left untouched for decades. A sudden crunch beneath her foot stopped her cold, a dented box buried under decaying papers. She crouched, brushed it off and opened it. Inside was a brittle stack of handwritten pages, tied with a faded blue ribbon. Her fingers hovered above it. One breath. Toe. She untied the knot. The manuscript inside looked older than anything else in the room. Ink bled through yellowed pages. She flipped the first page. Her mouth fell open. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." At the bottom of the cover page was the signature of a long-dead literary legend, one whose work had supposedly ended abruptly with his death. Her hands trembled. The script was unmistakable. Each line sang in his cadence. Elise backed against a shelf, heart pounding. She stared at the discovery. Not a fragment. A full novel. And the date? 1 year after his death. She whispered again. This was never supposed to exist. Elise didn't go to the front desk. She couldn't. She slipped between shelves like a shadow, clutching the manuscript to her chest. The early morning light filtered through stained glass. She found an alcove far from the staff desk and set the pages down. Her breath caught again. She opened her phone and typed the author's name, her fingers barely steady. The signature, she compared it. Exact match. No record of this title existed. No record of a manuscript posthumously completed. The ink, the style, it was all too perfect. But something felt wrong. The date on the last page, 1967. A year after his death. Elise leaned back, the realization crawling through her skin. Was this some elaborate forgery? Or something worse? She stared into the manuscript as if it would answer her. But it only waited. She began copying the first page into her notebook, slowly, methodically. Each line burned into her mind like scripture. She was documenting a ghost, she thought. The words carried his rhythm, his syntax, his soul. Her heart beat faster. Then came the scratching. Not from her pen. From somewhere else. Elise froze. The air was still. She looked up. No one. She glanced at the shelves, silent, unmoving. But something about the manuscript had changed. She couldn't say how. It was just a feeling. A wrongness. Like it had breathed. She shook her head, dismissed the thought, and continued writing. But her hand hesitated now. Was this manuscript merely lost? Or was it hidden? A voice startled her. Early morning for research. Elise snapped the notebook shut. She turned. The library director stood in the doorway, silver hair neatly combed, eyes sharp beneath thick glasses. Elise forced a smile. Cataloging. His eyes drifted to the manuscript. That looks unusual. Elise held her breath. It was in a donation box. He stepped closer, slowly. May I? She nodded, her throat dry. He bent over, hands behind his back, studying the handwriting. Where did you say you found it? Elise paused. Archives. The lie burned on her tongue. He nodded, but his gaze lingered on her. We may need to verify this. Could be a valuable piece. Elise's stomach nodded. She could feel it. He knew something. He leaned in, almost whispering. This shouldn't be here. Elise nodded faintly. The director straightened, adjusting his jacket. I'll take this upstairs. Let the curators handle it. Her pulse spiked. Wait, I should log it. His gaze pinned her. Don't worry. I'll credit the discovery. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. He picked up the manuscript with gloved fingers and turned to leave. Elise sat frozen, her breath shallow. It was slipping away. She'd found it, touched it, heard its voice, and now it was leaving her hands. You'll let me know what they find? She asked. The director didn't turn. Of course, he said, and vanished around the corner. Elise didn't sleep. She lay on her apartment floor, notes spread across the rug, pages covered in frantic handwriting. The director's words echoed in her mind. This shouldn't be here. Why? What did he know? She scoured the internet, searched library databases, obituaries, estate records. Nothing explained the manuscript. She found archived interviews, one from 1966 where the author hinted at a final project. One? A novel about memory. But it was never released. Elise clicked through timelines trying to line up dates. Her wall filled with notes and photos connected by strings. Classic obsession. And still, no record of this manuscript. The silence around it was loud. That kind of silence is never natural. At 4:17 a.m., she found a name, Clara Hemsley, the author's last known assistant. Still alive. Address listed in Maine. Elise stared at the screen. The director had taken the manuscript, but the truth might still be reachable. Just not from the library anymore. The next morning, Elise called in sick. She packed a bag with her notes, a recorder, and a copy of the manuscript's first page she'd copied by hand. She booked a bus ticket. The librarian was becoming a detective. The ride to Maine was long and gray, passing through sleepy towns under cloudy skies. She kept replaying the same interview clip. The author leaned forward, eyes twinkling. The final story, he had said, is always the one that haunts you. Elise clutched the headphone cord tightly. She arrived late afternoon. Clara's house was modest, tucked between pine trees, isolated. Elise stood outside the gate, heart pounding. Was she ready? She rang the bell. Moments passed. A silhouette moved behind the curtain. The door creaked open. An elderly woman stood there, sharp-eyed, wrapped in a gray shawl. "You're not press," Clara said. "No?" Elise whispered. "I found something." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Come in." Clara's living room smelled of cedar and old books. Walls lined with shelves. Tapestries dulled with time. Elise sat on a worn armchair, clutching her notes. Clara moved slowly, graceful despite her age. Mid-80s, with piercing eyes and deliberate movements. Elise showed her the copied page. Clara studied it in silence. This was his final work, Clara finally said. But it was never finished. Elise leaned forward. But this one is. It's complete. Clara frowned. Then, someone finished it without him. Elise's voice trembled. Is that even possible? Clara didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled a box from beneath a cabinet. Inside, more handwritten notes. He dictated parts of it. I transcribed some. But the last quarter. She shook her head. It was never done. I was there. He died with it unfinished. Elise whispered. Then what did I find? Clara laid out her old notes, and Elise compared them to the manuscript. The handwriting was identical, but some pages, especially near the end, were missing from Clara's collection. Elise showed her a copied paragraph. Clara's hand shook. That's not mine, and not his either. Elise froze. Then who? Clara stared at the script. It's too perfect, like it was trying to sound like him. She reached for a photograph on the shelf. He used to say stories had lives of their own. Maybe this one kept writing itself. Elise laughed nervously. You think it's alive? Clara didn't smile. No. I think someone finished it. Someone who shouldn't have. Her fingers brushed the faded photo, her younger self beside the author. Elise felt it again, that cold stillness in her bones. A ghost that didn't want to be forgotten. Before Elise left, Clara took her hand. Whatever you're chasing, be careful. That manuscript, it's not normal. Elise nodded but didn't speak. As she stepped out into the gray afternoon, the clouds broke slightly. A single beam of light touched her notebook. She opened it and reread the last line she'd copied. It was the ending. But it didn't feel like an end. It felt like a door. Elise closed the notebook. Her mind raced. If Clara didn't finish the story, and the author died before it was done, then someone, or something, finished it. But why keep it hidden? Why let it surface now? As she walked away from the house, she felt watched. Not by Clara. By the story itself. Like the manuscript had found her. Not the other way around. Back at the library, Elise stepped into silence. The main floor felt different, like something had shifted. She walked briskly past the circulation desk. The director was nowhere in sight. Her heart thudded faster. She went straight to the archives. The manuscript was gone. Not just gone, scrubbed. No log entry. No box. No evidence it had existed. Elise stared at the empty shelf where she'd first found it. Her name tag from the day before still lay there, half buried under folders. Panic spread through her chest. She checked the internal database. No entries under the author's name, not even his published work. It had been erased. She rushed to the reading alcove. The cameras, gone. No footage. Someone had covered every trail. Her hands clenched. Whoever had it didn't want it found. But they didn't know she had copied a page. Elise whispered to herself, "They erased the book, but they didn't erase me." Elise returned home and locked the door behind her. She placed the copied page on her desk and began to read it again. The words felt different now. Heavy. Intentional. She grabbed a fresh notebook and began copying more, her handwriting shaking slightly. The words formed perfectly structured paragraphs. But one line, one sentence, wasn't the same as before. She flipped back to the original. It had changed. Just one word, replaced with another. Impossible. She wasn't hallucinating. She knew what she'd written. Her throat dried. She read further. Another word altered. Then, another. Elise pulled away. The ink on the page wasn't wet, but it felt alive. She backed into the wall. The copied manuscript sat quietly on the desk, unmoving. But the silence it held now wasn't peaceful. It was watching. She scanned the page into her laptop. The moment the file loaded, her computer froze. The screen flickered. Her cursor moved on its own, hovering over the sentence that had changed. A chill crawled down her spine. The lights in her room dimmed. She yanked the power cable. The screen stayed on. A message appeared in the document window. "This story belongs to me." Elise slammed the laptop shut. Her breathing became shallow. She turned on every light in the apartment. Her notebook sat open where she'd left it, but the paragraph she'd just copied was blank. She touched the page. Dry. Cold. Wand. Clean. Dye. Her fingers trembled. Something was rewriting the manuscript from inside the paper. The story was evolving, feeding on her attention. Elise whispered, "What are you?" She gathered her bag, stuffed the pages inside, and ran. The city outside felt alien. Unfamiliar streets, colder air. It was nearly midnight, but the streetlights buzzed strangely, and shadows seemed to move slower than they should. Elise ducked into a diner, fluorescent lights humming, empty booths stretching like a liminal dream. She sat at the far end, ordered tea, and opened her notebook. She had to finish copying. Maybe that was the only way to understand it. Each sentence felt like a key, unlocking something. But she sensed it again. Eyes. One. A man sat 2 booths over, untouched coffee steaming. He hadn't been there before. He wasn't reading, just watching. Elise closed the notebook slowly. The man smiled. "You've read too much," he said. Her hands tightened around the notebook. "Who are you?" The man leaned in slightly, his face calm. "I'm just a reader, like you." Elise felt the weight of the manuscript in her bag. "What do you want?" He shrugged. "It doesn't matter what I want. The story wants to be told." She stood slowly. "Then I'll finish it." The man's smile faded. "No, you'll lose yourself in it." Elise walked out, trembling. On the street the wind howled louder. She pressed the notebook to her chest. Something pulsed beneath the cover, like a heartbeat. Not hers. She knew now. The story didn't want to be discovered. It wanted to consume. But it had chosen her. The last line she'd read echoed in her mind. The words become flesh. Elise didn't go home. She wandered. City streets blurred around her. She stopped beneath a flickering street lamp, notebook clutched tight. The wind pulled at her coat. The world felt too quiet. Something inside her whispered to keep writing. She ducked into a closed bookstore's alleyway and flipped open the notebook. The last page now had words she didn't write. A scene. A place. She recognized it. The Central Library, its old restricted wing. Long sealed. Elise stared. The story was leading her. Not metaphorically. Literally. She hailed a cab and gave the address. As the car moved, she realized her reflection in the window wasn't following her motion. It stared back, unmoving. She looked away. At the library's iron gates, she stepped out and stood alone. A storm gathered above, dark clouds swirling. She whispered, "You want me to finish it? I will." Lightning split the sky as the gates creaked open by themselves. The restricted wing smelled like forgotten dreams, dust, ink, and mold. Elise moved slowly down the long corridor, her footsteps echoing. The lights buzzed overhead, flickering in waves. Each shelf she passed whispered something she couldn't quite hear. She reached a locked wooden door at the end. Her fingers rested on the handle. It turned without resistance. Inside, the room was circular, domed ceiling cracked with age. In the center stood a single reading desk. On it, nothing. Elise opened her notebook. The ink on the last page began to move, swirling into new lines. A map. She blinked. The diagram pointed to the room's stone floor. She knelt, fingers brushing the cold surface. One tile was looser than the rest. She pried it up. Beneath, a hollow cavity, and inside it, a second manuscript, sealed in wax. Elise gasped. The story had left itself behind. She broke the wax seal. The new manuscript was written in the same hand, but the title was different. Not the one she'd found before. This one read, Volume 2. Elise's pulse quickened. The pages were warm to the touch. As she turned them, ink shimmered. It wasn't just telling a story, it was rewriting her memory. She saw moments flash in her mind that didn't belong to her. A man writing by candlelight. A funeral no one attended. A voice whispering her name long before she'd been born. She clutched the book and stumbled back. "What are you?" she whispered again. But this time, the page answered. Words appeared in real time. The one who remembers. Elise dropped the manuscript. It thudded to the floor, pages still turning without touch. The lights in the dome surged. The library wasn't a place anymore. It was a vessel. And she was part of it now. Books flew from shelves. Dust clouds exploded in every direction. The floor vibrated. Elise covered her ears as a deep hum rose from beneath the foundation. The second manuscript hovered slightly, pages suspended. She tried to run, but the door had vanished. Only shelves. No exit. A voice echoed through the walls, neither male nor female, not spoken, but known. Finish what was begun. Elise dropped to her knees. Her pen slipped from her coat and rolled to the manuscript. The tip touched the page. Ink spread outward, lines forming not from her hand but from the force itself. It was writing through her. Her mouth moved, involuntarily. Words spilled out. A language she'd never learned, yet somehow understood. She was no longer the reader. She was the vessel. The story had found its author, and it had chosen her. Time unraveled. Elise saw decades pass in seconds. Wars, births, ink-stained revolutions, forgotten truths. All part of this story. She gasped as visions overtook her. Then stillness. She was on the floor. The manuscript's gone. The room, quiet. A shaft of morning light pierced the cracked ceiling. Her notebook lay open beside her. One final sentence inked across the bottom: "The author returns when the story is ready." She stood shakily, hair damp with sweat, hands trembling. The door had returned. She stepped through it, into the library's main wing. Empty. Wine. As if no time had passed. But Elise knew better. She wasn't the same girl who had opened a dusty box in a basement. She clutched the notebook to her chest and whispered, "I didn't write the story, it wrote me." Elise returned to her apartment, but it no longer felt like home. The walls felt too thin, her belongings unfamiliar. She sat at her desk, the notebook still warm in her hands. Pages she hadn't written filled its final chapters. The handwriting was hers, but she didn't remember writing any of it. She reread each sentence. Everyone echoed her thoughts, her fears. Private things she never voiced. It knew her. Had always known her. Elise picked up a pen, hand trembling. "Where does it end?" she wrote. The page remained blank. Then one word appeared. "Here." The lights flickered. Outside, the street went silent. No footsteps. No cars. She stood up and looked through the window. The world outside had stopped. No motion. Just frozen stillness. A breathless moment between moments. Elise turned back. The notebook snapped shut on its own. She whispered, "What do you want from me?" The cover glowed faintly. She grabbed the notebook and left. The city was frozen. People caught mid-step, birds mid-flight, traffic lights frozen on yellow. Elise walked through it all, unnoticed. She reached the library steps. It loomed larger than she remembered. Inside, the lights were on, but no one was there. She walked through the aisles until she reached the main reading hall. The long tables were empty. Dust hung in the air, suspended like memory. She laid the notebook in the center of the table. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked. The room answered with silence. Then the sound of a single page flipping echoed from behind her. She turned. At the far end of the room stood the man from the diner. Still. Watching. "It's ready," he said. Elise stepped back. "What is?" His smile widened. "You." The man approached slowly. "You're not reading the story anymore," he said. "You are the story." Elise shook her head. "No, I found it." He nodded. "And it found you." He gestured to the notebook. "Open it." She hesitated. "What happens if I do?" His voice lowered. "Then we begin." Elise opened it. A blank page. Then words appeared. Chapter 1. Her heart pounded. "No," she whispered. It already began. The man said nothing. She could feel it then, pulling at her. The story was unfolding, but not on the page. Around her. The library darkened. Shelves lengthened. The ceiling disappeared into shadow. The man vanished. Elise stood alone, the notebook open in her hands, pages flipping in windless air. Each one had her name at the top. No. She was inside it now. The story had written her in. The library dissolved into ink and paper. Walls became paragraphs. Light broke into language. Elise walked forward, every step echoing with a new sentence written beneath her feet. She passed doors labeled with chapter titles. One read, Origin. Another, Loss. She opened one. Inside, she saw herself as a child, reading in bed, a flashlight beneath the covers. Another door. Her first heartbreak. Then, another. Her mother's funeral. The story wasn't about the author. It was her. Every room a memory, every step forward a confession. Elise fell to her knees. Why me? The answer was already written on the wall above. Because you believed. A final door appeared. grander than the rest. Its title, Truth. Her hand reached forward, not trembling. Ready, Wedgie. Elise opened the final door. Light spilled over her. Not blinding. Warm, but wall. Inside was a blank page, suspended in the air. A pen floated beside it. She stepped in. The page shimmered, waiting. "It's not finished," she whispered. "You finish it," said a voice. Not the man's. Not the author's. Her own. She reached for the pen. Her fingers curled around it. The moment she touched the page, everything stilled. Time, dew, sound, breath. She didn't need to write. She had already lived it. The story was memory, shaped by belief. The ink bled from her skin, not as pain, but release. When it ended, she stepped back. The page had only one line. She became the story. The pen dropped. The door closed. Elise stood in silence. Alone. What? But never lost again. Elise woke on the floor of her apartment. Morning sunlight poured through the curtains like nothing had happened. The desk was clean. The notebook gone. Her laptop rebooted, clock blinking as if it had lost time. She stood slowly, every joint aching. Had it all been a dream? A psychotic break? No. The pen was still in her hand. And on her forearm, words. Faint, written in her own script. A passage she didn't remember writing. She grabbed her phone and searched again for the author's name. Anino. Nothing. No books. No records. The world had rewritten itself without him. She typed her own name. Dozens of hits. Literary forums, discussion threads, fan speculation. And anonymous archivist discovers posthumous masterpiece. Elise blinked. Her name wasn't in the credits, but her story was. Her words. Her handwriting. She wasn't the author, but the author was her. Somehow she'd become the voice the story needed. Elise walked to the bookstore near campus. She hadn't been there in months. On display in the front window was a book she had never published. Its cover was minimalist, white background, no author name, just a title, The Remembered. She stepped inside. The clerk smiled. "That one's selling like wildfire. Creeped me out though." Elise lifted the book. The dedication page read, "To the one who listened." Her throat tightened. She flipped to the final chapter. The words were hers. The story she'd lived. But it wasn't written from her perspective. It was written about her. She looked around. Every customer in the store had a copy. Some read aloud. Some stared in silence. The air shifted. Something old and familiar had rooted itself in these pages. Elise put the book down gently and walked out. The story no longer belonged to her, but it still followed. Back on the street, Elise noticed people glancing at her, not just curiously, but knowingly. A man passed her and murmured, "Thank you." A woman nodded, as if she recognized Elise from a dream. The city wasn't the same. Or maybe Elise wasn't. She walked quickly now, as if chased by something unseen. Back at home, her mailbox held a single envelope. No return address. Inside was a single page, one sentence in handwriting that matched hers exactly. "Return to the beginning." She stared at it. The basement. The box. The moment it all began. She needed to see it again. Not to find answers, but to finish her role. She packed lightly, pulled on her coat, and left before the fear could change her mind. This time she knew what she was walking into. And she wasn't afraid. The story was hers now. Not to tell, but to close. The basement hadn't changed. Still dim. Still forgotten. Still thick with silence. Elise stepped carefully, each footstep a memory. She found the shelf. The box was there. Again. Or maybe still. Dust, untouched. She opened it. Empty. except for a mirror. A small round mirror with a brass frame. She lifted it and saw her reflection, but younger. Her face when she first started here. Her voice echoed in her memory. It can't be. Elise smiled faintly. But it is. She placed the mirror back inside and closed the box. Some stories weren't meant to be read. Some stories weren't meant to be found. But some, just a few, were meant to find someone. And when they did, they rewrote everything. Elise walked out of the archives for the last time. Her shadow stayed a moment longer before following. The story was finished. But it would never end. Elise stood on the library steps, dusk painting the sky in hues of violet and copper. People passed by, unaware that something ancient had stirred and settled again. She held no book, no manuscript, no evidence, just memory. And that was enough. She looked up at the building, a place of stories, a place that had, for a moment, become one. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. The next chapter begins. She smiled softly, then turned away from the building. This time, she wouldn't follow the story. She would live one. And maybe, just maybe, one day someone else would find a forgotten manuscript in a dusty box, and they too would whisper, "It can't be." Elise didn't look back. Her story had already been written. But her life was still blank page after blank page, waiting. Elise sat in a quiet cafe, far from the library, far from the city she had once called home. A month had passed since the manuscript vanished, since the story found its ending. Or beginning. Her notebook was blank again, clean pages, no magic. But the echoes remained. Sometimes she heard voices in cafes, snippets of dialogue she never wrote but recognized. Sometimes she dreamed in paragraphs. The world had quieted, but her mind hadn't. A waitress walked by and paused. "You're the one from the article, right?" Elise smiled softly. "I'm just someone who reads." The waitress nodded and left, but something lingered. Elise sipped her coffee, watching the people pass outside the window. She didn't feel watched anymore. She felt remembered, and for the first time, she didn't need the story to define her. She existed outside the pages. But still, she carried a pen, just in case. A small bookstore, 2 towns over, displayed a single book on a dusty shelf. No fanfare, no title, no author, just a dark cover and blank spine. But inside, every page whispered a different story to each reader. One woman read it as a love letter. A boy saw his future. An old man wept as it described something he'd never spoken aloud. The story changed with the hands that touched it. No one could explain how. It never had a price tag. But no one ever stole it either. And when someone tried to copy it, the ink vanished. A rumor spread about a book that found you, about a story that knew you better than you knew yourself. And at the end of every version, one line always remained, to the one who listened. The world kept turning. But now it whispered through pages no one remembered writing. Elise visited the library again. Not to search, not to dig, but to walk the aisles like a reader. It was different now. She didn't belong to the story anymore. But it would always belong to her. She moved past shelves filled with names and titles, until she reached the reading room. A girl sat there, maybe 17, flipping through a handwritten journal. Elise smiled. It wasn't the manuscript. Just a diary. Well, stories started somewhere. She sat across the room and watched. The girl glanced up. "Are you a writer?" Elise thought. "No, but I remember things." The girl nodded. "Me too." Elise stood walking away, letting the light pour over her. She didn't need to hold the story anymore. It had already written itself across 1,000 people. She had passed it on. And whoever came next, she'd listen for them too. Back in her apartment, Elise finally unpacked the last box she had ignored for months. Old papers, photographs, the pen that had once written without her touch. She placed it in a drawer. Not to hide it, to let it rest. She lit a candle and opened a new journal. This time every word would be hers. No whispers, no visions, just truth. And maybe truth was enough. She wrote her name on the first page. Not as a character, but as a person. A survivor. She paused. Then wrote one sentence. The story ends where you begin. A smile formed. The candle flickered. She didn't look over her shoulder. No shadows waited. No books called her. For once, it was quiet. And she liked that. Outside, the wind carried a faint echo. But inside, everything was still. Still, but alive. Somewhere, maybe far, maybe close. A library no one remembers holds a shelf that doesn't age. And on that shelf, a book waits. It waits for the next voice, the next listener, the next soul who dares to ask, what if this story is mine? And when they find it, they'll flip a page. Their own handwriting will greet them. Their own secrets stitched in ink. And they'll understand. The stories never truly vanish. They shift. They breathe. They become what we need. And maybe, just maybe, they become who we are. Elise will never know who finds it next. That's not her chapter. But her story, her echo remains. Waiting. Whispering. The story ends where you begin. And somewhere in the silence, another reader opens a page and listens.